Your tongue is the biggest thief of your future. You think sharing your grand plans builds momentum, but you're actually just leaking the fire your hands need to build. Have you ever noticed how the more you talk about a goal, the less you actually do? It's a trap. You've already cashed the check of success for a cheap, well done from someone who doesn't even care. You're exhausted because you're living in a future you haven't earned yet. You are carrying the heavy expectations of others before you've even laid the first brick. But today, we're ending the noise. I'm going to share a story about a man who lost everything to his own big mouth, and the ancient master who showed him the power of the sealed vow. By the end of this, you'll have a silent strength that doesn't ask for permission. But first, you need to understand the hidden reason why your brain is tricking you into feeling like a winner, while your life stays exactly the same. A psychological trap we will uncover in the next moment. Dorian stood in the center of the room, wineglass in hand, painting vivid pictures of an empire he hadn't yet built. To his peers, he was a titan in the making. He basked in their borrowed respect, never noticing how thin his own foundation really was. But the party always ends, and the silence of a cold apartment is a brutal judge for a man of words. You see, your brain is a clever little trickster. When Dorian told his friends about his big break, his mind released the same reward chemicals as if he'd actually finished the job. He had cashed a check his bank account couldn't back up. Now, when it was time for the heavy lifting, there was nothing left in the tank. But there is a darker weight Dorian didn't see coming. The invisible burden of unearned expectations. Every "how's the project going" became a stinging whip across his back, turning his passion into a chore he started to resent. He was carrying the stones of other people's curiosity, a mountain he built out of hot breath. He was starving for a seat at a table he hadn't even finished carving. But what happens when the audience leaves and you're left alone with the weight of a life you haven't built? Dorian was about to discover an ancient secret to stop this leakage of soul, but it required a price most people are too afraid to pay. Do you know what the master demanded he do with his grand plans? The answer is more physical than you think. Dorian arrived at the dusty gates, clutching his thick scroll like a trophy he'd already won. He began to recite the vision he'd practiced 1,000 times. But Master Kael didn't even glance at the ink. To a man who builds with stone, a man who builds with air is just a ghost in a fancy suit. For 3 days, the master declared a law. Dorian was to be a ghost, a shadow that didn't leave a single sound. But there was a catch. If Dorian felt the urge to announce his future or seek a nod of approval, he would have to carry a heavy stone across the yard. By the second hour, the silence began to feel like a physical weight pressing against his chest. Without the hollow good jobs from his social circle, he felt like he was literally disappearing. He realized he didn't know how to exist without an audience. Every time he broke the silence to brag about his scope, Kael pointed to a boulder. As Dorian stumbled, the cold granite digging into his palms, he learned the difference between the lightness of a lie and the burden of the truth. The stone didn't care about his vision. Kael warned that premature praise acts like a drought, sucking the moisture out of a plan before it can even sprout a root. But Dorian was about to see something even more intense, a force hidden in a soot-stained workshop that would show him why his leaks were actually destroying his life. What happens when you stop leaking and start boiling? The master was ready to show him the secret of the internal heat. Kael led Dorian into a soot-stained workshop, where a heavy iron kettle sat over a roaring flame. The water inside was screaming, a high-pitched whistle of wasted energy. With a flick of his wrist, Kael flipped the lid, and a massive cloud of steam vanished uselessly into the rafters. "This is how you've been living," the master said. "You are loud, you are visible, but you are utterly powerless. By shouting your dreams, you're letting your internal heat escape into the air for a cheap nod of approval." Then, Kael did something that made the floor vibrate. He slammed the lid shut and locked the valve. The screaming stopped, replaced by a low, predatory rumble. The kettle began to tremble with a focused, concentrated power. This was bottled fire. While the world outside endures the dry heat of public opinion, this energy stays in the coolness of the earth to build the pressure needed to crack the ground. Kael pulled a lever, and that trapped silence moved a steel piston that 10 men couldn't budge. Dorian realized his grand plans were just a collection of expensive leaks. Every time you speak a goal, you kill the fire required to achieve it. But there is a final terrifying stage to this ritual, a way to release this power so it builds your life instead of destroying your peace. Are you ready to see how to seal your own vow? Or will you keep leaking until you're empty? Dorian stood in the fading light, the silence finally feeling like a friend rather than a foe. He looked at his thick scroll, the one he'd been so proud of, and realized it was just a collection of expensive leaks. Master Kael leaned in, his voice sounding like ancient authority. Your tongue is a thief that steals the fuel your hands need to build. You see, the darkness isn't a prison. It is a nursery where your true growth happens, far away from the judgmental eyes of the world. If you reach for the dry heat of the sun too early, your dreams will be scorched into dust. Then came the ritual of the sealed vow. Kael didn't ask for a vision board to pin to a wall. He demanded a contract with the fire that governs the soul. Dorian wrote his one true goal and hit it with hot wax. For 90 days, he was to tell no soul, using the internal pressure to drive his daily actions instead of his speech. Dorian walked out of the yard, leaving his old plans behind in the soot. He didn't need a like or a supportive nod to feel valid anymore. He finally understood that the most powerful thing a man can possess is a secret he is actively turning into reality. But as he reached the city, a final question remained. How do you maintain this internal bake when the world is screaming for your attention? And more importantly, what are the specific steps to drop the stones you've been carrying for years? The path to that lightness is closer than you think. Dorian finally understood that the most powerful thing a man can possess is a secret he is actively turning into reality. He walked away from the noise, fueled by a bottled fire that no longer needed the world's permission. But let's be honest, you aren't just watching a story about a man in a workshop. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. Like Dorian, you might be exhausted not from work, but from the soul-crushing burden of being who everyone else expects you to be. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, the stones that have been leaking your energy and stalling your progress, I created a guide for your specific journey. It is called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours. It's for those who want to finally let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. When you secure your copy today, I'm including 2 essential tools to help you master your internal pressure. The bonus, Learning to Let Go, which deepens the master's lessons on silence, and When Saying No is an Act of Self-Love, the ultimate shield for your internal bake. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Don't let your future be stolen by the need for a like. Stop performing. Start building. For now, simply type, "The seal is set," in the comments to begin your 90 days of silent strength. The world doesn't need to see your roots. It just needs to see your results.